Hello, and welcome to Building Conversations. I'm your host, Kiera Brady, Project Manager at Structure Tone New York. In today's episode, we're diving into one of the industry's most dynamic sectors, broadcast and media. Joining me today are Structure Tone New York's Executive Vice President, Scott Corneby, Pavarini Northeast Project Manager, James Dunn, and Structure Tone New Jersey's Regional Vice President, Michael Farrell. Experts with years of experience delivering projects for some of the biggest names in media. Before we dive in, let's take a moment to introduce ourselves and share a bit about our roles and backgrounds. Mike, if you want to start.
Sure. Thanks, Kiera. My name is Mike Farrell. I'm the Regional Vice President with Structure Tone New Jersey. I'm entering my 25th year with the company. I've had various roles with the company, from an assistant superintendent through estimating, through a project executive, and then the last few years part of the senior management team of New Jersey, where I now lead the business unit. Our business in New Jersey is very diversified. We've got work in sectors of mission critical, corporate interiors, life sciences, industrial, as well as a bit of higher education, of course, healthcare. An emerging sector for us is the studios and broadcasts, and it's really exciting to be here today to speak more about it.
Jamie?
My name is James Dunn. I am a senior project manager with the Pavarini Northeast company. I started with the company back in 1997, and over my career, I've had the opportunity to build large-scale corporate headquarters projects, mission-critical projects, and most recently spent a lot of time in the media studio broadcast sector.
Scott.
Good morning, all. I'm Scott Corneby with the New York office. Nearing my 40th year with the firm this coming July. My current role is Executive Vice President and handle a lot of our larger key accounts. Came up through the ranks as a young super back in 1985. Went on to become a project manager, helped run the department, and then eventually ran our New York operations for some 15 years or so. And the last 8 or 10 years has been in the executive role on, like I said, some of our key accounts, and many of them which were broadcast and media type projects.
So we'll start with just, setting the scene. Could you start by giving us an overview of what makes building in the broadcast and media sector so unique? Mike, if you want to take this one.
Sure, happy to. These projects can be very complex. They've got a lot of special elements. Although there's a lot of uniqueness to the projects in this sector, there's also a lot of similarities to a lot of our core businesses, as you heard from our mission critical data center work and infrastructure projects that we've done. But specific to the broadcast studios, there's obviously different elements. The studio design, the broadcast studios are really specific in terms of the acoustic requirements that they need. They need to minimize sound interference, optimize audio quality. So these projects will have very specific soundproofing materials that you'll hear from the team a little bit later when we get into some of the details. The room dimensions matters. Specifics on where cameras and microphones can be located are obviously very important to these kind of projects. They often have control rooms, and those control rooms are designed with advanced technologies, where they're going to accommodate large screens to monitor the productions, as well as complex audio and video equipment. So there's a lot of planning that goes on, a lot of coordinating with cable management on these projects. Again, some similarities to a lot of our mission critical work, but unique to their specifics as well. Lighting is obviously a big focus on these projects. There's a lot of specifics for lighting. You've got to have proper lighting for the broadcasting. As you can imagine, they've got to be adjustable. You got to have the best visual quality at the end for the production. Often these projects also have to have very flexible spaces. They've got to be very adaptable for different types of productions, whether it's broadcast or live events. So that those are unique elements that come out from design that we see and we work towards. Oftentimes there could be module walls that are part of these spaces, or movable walls, modular furniture. I mentioned cable management, and of course we'll talk a little bit more later on really how the latest technology infrastructure has to be integrated into these projects, whether it be high-speed internet, advanced broadcasting equipment, and of course reliable power, and often redundant sources of power, because these productions cannot go down, especially if you're in a live environment. You can imagine you've got to have reliable power and redundant backup power in case there's an issue there.
Great. So this one will be for Scott and Jamie. What are some common challenges you face when working on broadcast media projects compared to other sectors we have worked in?
I go first, Jamie?
Sure,
So
go ahead.
I believe some of the common challenges I've seen on several of the jobs we've done, and they can be many and they can be varied, of course, as Jamie would know for sure. First off, you need to try and corral and establish all the broadcast decisions early on. It's a challenge, but you need to get the end users involved to help facilitate the decisions on the design so that the final set of construction documents that come out, we will be building what they are anticipating 6-9 months down the road. Again, all trying to reduce that surprise element at the end. Getting everyone involved early to pay extra attention to the early above ceiling coordination. Many of these studio ceilings, as you guys are aware, the insulation, sheetrock, 30 feet in the air, 2 or 3 different layers. It's really important to get everything right from the beginning and it's critical to get that part of the project done on time with good QA, QC. Obviously, towards vibration, any issues up there in terms of access to equipment. Going back to those ceilings later on is a real challenge. So getting that right and paying extra attention to that early, is definitely a challenge and a concern. I think getting all the parties to agree in how to future-proof these rooms is something also that we've seen on a lot of them. Do you add extra sleeves? Do we add extra conduits, cable runs, cable trays? Again, giving them the ability in the future, if somebody needs to make a late change or an add to the project, there's a way to get back in and out of some of these rooms. I think another common challenge we've seen, both us and our clients, and this is a tricky one, is getting the final TV and broadcast set people involved early. And I know that's a challenge for our clients. We're trying to build the job. They're trying to wait to the last possible minute to design what set they want. They want it to be cutting edge in look. They want it to be cutting edge in technology. Yet at the end of the day, when we turn over a shell, whatever their set's going to be, it needs to be able to fit in there and all work together. So I think those are some of the real key challenges, and then maybe lastly, the need for the end user and the commissioning agents or the commissioning engineers to establish the testing, the commissioning requirements early so that there's adequate time built into the schedule for acoustical testing and final commissioning. I think those are a lot of the key challenges we've seen on some of the New York projects.
And I would agree, Scott. Kind of expanding a little bit on the engagement, the early engagement of the end users. It's it's a critical item in any project, really, because in the end, when you turn over a project, you're going to want the people that are going to populate and use it to enjoy it and it be useful and productive for them. But in the media broadcast construction sector, that end use is so key. Because like Scott touched on before, even in the span of building a project, the technology evolves. The way that they're going to broadcast, the way that they're going to produce, whatever it is. And so that end user, those operators, bringing them literally into those construction meetings, those pre-con meetings early, and understanding not only their needs, but more importantly, understanding their timelines. Because unlike a lot of projects that we build, you turn it over to a user, they go into an office. This is essentially like a big garage, a tool set area that they're going to work in. So in order for them to set up, not only just set up, test, prove, and make sure that they're broadcast ready, it's a long period of time. And you really need to bring those folks into that process of the build so that they understand what it takes to get them to the point where you turn over, and then they can look down the road at the timeline. One of the other big challenges that we have certainly in the Stanford market seen, and we're going to get into that a little bit later, but it's structural concerns, because these studios need to not only be isolated from the rest of the building, but they also need to be able to accommodate lighting like Mike spoke about before, as well as, whatever is going to be part of the shot inside the studio. So the structural design is key, and all those things whether it's structural, whether it's end use, certainly cable paths, accessibility, all of those items being, brought into that early design phase and working that team with you as a partner from the beginning to the turnover is key. That's certainly, what we'd like to cover.
Great, yeah. And I think to your point with the turnover and then being a working partner with them, because we know like when the set comes in, the amount of adjustments you have to make, you have to drop sprinkler heads, adjust to their set once we turn over that box to them.
And Scott said it before, the flexibility of the space. You don't want to call it a vanilla box construction, like we know in the industry where you would come in and fit it out. But essentially, these studios, at least many of them, are set up that way so that when they come in to do the shot, to do that, to make that product, they can set it up however they want. So that's a tricky part of the construction, certainly.
And you mentioned on the structural component, especially on larger soundstage spaces, that's a key element to have, clear spans, very high ceilings, no columns, because line of sight is very important. And obviously large equipment building sets are part of it. We've also seen the large elephant doors between stages that are unique to these types of projects that require quite a lot of structural considerations on these projects as well.
So keeping Scott and Jamie on the hot seat. So we've had some pretty unique projects, from a podcast studio at Apple to a CNN TV studio and everything in between. Can you share some details about one or two high-profile broadcast or media projects that you've worked on and what have made these projects stand out?
So I think what we do for a living, all projects have a unique element and have some standout point to them, but especially on these projects, for me anyway, the planning, the intense scheduling, and the understanding of the technology and the requirements that will be needed at the end seem to jump out at me. Some of the recent projects we've done in New York that come to mind are very complex headquarter projects in brand new buildings, a little different than maybe some of the activity you guys have had in your regions. And they all brought in various entities, meaning there were several companies underneath the common platform. All of these needing, obviously, a new computer room to run them, becomes the heartbeat of the broadcast facility, whether it's a computer room, a technical gear room, a critical equipment room, whatever the client's acronym is for that room. That becomes the most important room on the project, quite frankly. And then along with that, obviously, is MDF rooms, TR closets, which run north and south in the building and for redundancy. But really understanding, besides those, the mechanical infrastructure, the electrical and the low voltage infrastructure, all of this to provide, ultimately at the end, the broadcast and communication needs that they will truly require. A lot of these broadcast media projects that we've all done, they have extensive quantities of studios, control rooms, edit rooms, voiceover rooms. Again, they have their own acronyms, but these take extensive coordination so that what we build is what the broadcast integrator truly wants when they show up months down the road with their consoles, with their equipment. Is the room the right size? Is the electric in the right position? Is the low voltage feeding the consoles from the right position? Again, setting it up so that they have time to build, set up, do their testing, commissioning. I think all of these broadcast type rooms, require early turnover, and that's part of the scheduling thing. Often we turn those rooms over 6-9 months, even a year in advance. I think you mentioned CNN. I think we turned over those areas a year in advance. But again, the idea is to give the integrator time to build, test, commission, and eventually for the end user and the talent to have a chance to rehearse before they all go live. So I think those are a lot of things that stand out on these type projects, a little different than our, typical corporate fit out.
So, in the Connecticut market, we've had the opportunity to build some very high profile studio space. And I think, when I think about the projects and what really stands out about them, each one of these facilities was in an occupied facility. So, if you can imagine, doing, this extravagant, technical space within an occupied building, with other tenants, that brings on all kinds of unique challenges, which we're typically used to because we always, do construction within, multi-tenant facilities. But because of the requirements, the structural requirements, the segregation of the utilities, what needs to be done in order to prep yourself to begin to build that space. That's where, that's one big thing that stands out to me, with these projects. You touched on before the central equipment room, CER. They have all different acronyms for this setup, but essentially it's the heart, of the media broadcast, technology. And in each of these projects that we had done, you have that entity, and I like to compare it to a normal teledata and IT infrastructure. However, it runs side by side to it, and it has very similar distribution. So as you would plan a project like that, where you're coming from that central equipment room and you're branching out to all the different floors, to the IDF closets, in the technology, or in our case, the tech nests, the media, thing. That whole skeleton that you build, that's now going to house all of the media cabling, is very unique, and it takes a lot of planning. That's certainly something that stands out on all of the broadcast style projects that we've done. It's the planning ahead of time that we touched on before. And then ultimately, these spaces require an extensive QA/QC program. And it's not just the paint on the wall and how the base or the door jamb, hangs. It's the acoustics of the room. And, in at least the projects that we've been involved in, we were fortunate enough to have a design firm that designed the acoustics specifically, and then married that together with the architectural design. And the drawings that they provided were incredibly detailed. They almost looked like millwork drawings. But to that point, the detail that's required in order to build that space out, so ultimately the sound is proper in these rooms, no sound entering, no sound leaving, requires a very extensive program, right from the first piece of, the first line that's snapped on the floor to the last piece of sound acoustic insulation. But I think, those are things that really stand out, in those projects that we worked with.
Mike, this one's for you. How critical is technological integration in the construction of modern broadcast and media facilities?
Well, technological integration is absolutely critical in these types of spaces. And just hearing from Scott and Jamie now, it's evident in all the projects that we've been building that these elements exist. And it's really a reflection and learning a little bit more about what our clients are up against, what they're doing in their daily business, that ultimately shows up on the plans and in the projects that we're building. So, modern broadcasting relies heavily on advanced technologies like high-definition video, multiple camera setups, and then live streaming. So all of which require a lot of infrastructure that you just heard from both the guys on. And you've got to really understand and plan for those systems in our projects. Future-proofing, you've heard that a couple times already in our conversation today. It's really important that the infrastructure is flexible on these projects. So as the requirements within the spaces change, that they can adapt easily with minimal renovation work down the road. So understanding what that technology is and being able to look forward and put in future sleeves, allow for certain areas, be more flexible, certainly helps the spaces. You also heard that on elements, Scott had mentioned of leaving enough time for the integrators to do their thing long before we're done with the project, and that all really roots in efficiency of workflow for the production. So understanding how the spaces work from scripting through production, through editing matter, and that's really highly technical processes that have to be understood and worked into the design, and then we have to understand as we build through those spaces. Of course, like even we see in different sectors, is remote work is very much a part of this sector as well. So there's a lot of remote production capabilities that occur with these projects. So there's a lot of infrastructure, internet, high-speed networks that have to be able to integrate with some remote people working on these, connected to these projects as well. So, and then we did hear also how important data management is. So there's a lot of data analytics and in this sector as well, like many that we build for. So in this particular industry, broadcasters, they really want to analyze viewer behavior and preferences that would really change and lead to better content strategies. Ultimately, targeted advertising relates to this. So a lot of these projects need to have this data management capability within the site so they can process the information quickly and stay competitive.
So based on our lessons learned from past projects, what are some key design considerations that we work with the design teams on during that pre-construction phase when building or renovating spaces intended for media production? Jamie.
So I'll take that question one step further, and that's site selection. At least in one recent project, we were somewhat involved in assisting in site selection, and the big component when it comes to that is the availability of multiple utilities to the facility. Because remember, at least in a lot of cases with the projects that we've been involved in, they're going to be broadcasting live content. So downtime is something that you cannot have. So, that availability of multiple utilities to the facility is key. But then taking it from there, I can't stress it enough, the development of that mission critical infrastructure, because really that, again, is what it is. That support system, the HVAC system being, dedicated to the media and broadcast space and also separated from the regular operations within that space, because a lot of times, this broadcast and media work is happening off hours. The base building system, you can't really rely on that. You're going to shut it down for use reasons and cost. You want to have that independent system. So, I can't stress enough that that mission critical infrastructure design is one big considerations. Then of course, expandability. One of the projects that I'm thinking about, from the beginning of the project when we first started to the end, I was surprised how much changed, as far as what they had to add to the space. So, taking a look at the spaces that you're constructing with the design team and bringing that element of expandability, whether it's, and not just access, but your infrastructure, electrical expandability, HVAC expandability, conduit and raceway expandability, not just building for the moment, but building for the future. And then, of course, access, access to, to all of that infrastructure so that you can expand, you can add cabling. When I first started, in the sector, it didn't really make sense to me that, there would be so much additional cable pulled, during not only as you're building, as you're trying to close things out. And I never really stood it at first, but now I do. I understand because it's the way that the technology, the way the use of the rooms is going to change. So access to, basically not affect what you just built, these beautiful spaces, whether it's, into a raised floor system with carpet tiles, how do you pull the carpet up, put it back down to make it look right? An example on a project is we actually worked with a manufacturer to install a magnetic backing onto the floor finish so that it could be put down on the raised floor tiles. You could lift it up, you could get in there, put it back down, and it wasn't this constant maintenance thing. But those are some of the key design considerations, I think.
Right. Yeah. Sometimes we have so much cable, it looks like it's supporting the raised floor.
Yeah. And to drop back on that too, structural capability. I mentioned it before. Sometimes you're not just putting this under the floor on a slab, you're running it in racks above the ceiling. Can the structure support all that cable, all that infrastructure? That's something that also needs to be paid attention to very closely.
So Scott, this one's for you. How do you manage strict timelines on broadcast and media projects? What strategies do we employ to meet those tight deadlines?
So interesting question, but again, all projects have a unique beginning to them. But I think first off, in the broadcast media type jobs, the pre-construction for both us and the client is critical, and it has to be looked at as a true investment. Jamie mentioned it about the uniqueness of building the projects, turning them over to an integrator, having time to commission them, and ultimately test them and then rehearse. Those are all major milestones within a schedule. So on some of the large jobs we've done, you get excited that you finished a space and you turned it over to them on time, but there's so many more parts that have to go before that element is really successful. So, I think early on, as the project and the scope is evolving, it's critical during pre-construction to begin developing a really detailed schedule. That's not only just our construction subcontractors, but it's the end user, it's the integrator, it's the equipment and everything, from the early turnover rooms, right till we finish them up. This schedule, not only, like I said, is our subs, but on several of these jobs, we turn these areas over 6 months, 9 months, maybe a year in advance, because the broadcast integrators have so much time and so much work they need to do. So I think the schedule really needs to show all the early turnovers from computer rooms, technology rooms, the studios, the edit rooms, et cetera, but also the support and the routes to get to and from them are important. I think Mike mentioned it earlier. When we turn over these rooms, we often have other areas in the balance of the floor to finish, but they need to start their work in order to get to the same end line. So they need to have the ability to get the cabling to and from every one of these technology rooms. So again, the schedule really needs to be mapped out early on. And I think the earlier everybody understands each other's discipline, we can create a much better schedule that's for all. In order to help accomplish this, I think part of the question, it's like a lot of jobs. We try to order all the long lead items early, all the equipment early, any special systems early. Definitely on these type jobs, you want an early award for any above ceiling trades, for the above ceiling coordination activity. You have to get out of the ceilings early on these type projects. A lot of them are a shell within a shell, insulation, multiple layers of sheetrock. It's almost impossible to go back up there if something's not right to begin with. Sometimes we may make a suggestion to a client for a early award of a design assist, if you will. Maybe there's a unique element to the project, and we might suggest bringing a subcontractor early to help finish the drawings. Again, not that the consultants can't finish it, but it helps finish it together collectively, so that when that's finally done, you're actually through the shop drawing and the sample process already, and you're ready to go. All of this is just in an effort to ensure a steady flow of execution of these early areas and get them turned over in time. And again, I think we've repeated it 100 times. The QA, QC, the ability to leave time for testing, for sound testing, for vibration, for commissioning, for startup is critical in these jobs. Again, all allowing that when the talent finally shows up, they have time to rehearse in a space that's finished. Not partially finished, but done, commissioned, and totally work. So I think that's what really makes these type projects hard is the scheduling. But again, if everybody buys into that, the pre-con is really the key driver in this. It makes these projects much, much more successful.
To add to that, and Kiera, you asked earlier about cutting technologies within the studio broadcast spaces themselves. What Scott just explained up front in pre-construction reminds me of how we use cutting technologies as construction managers to augment our schedules and to plan early. So, similar to how any industry's got their own technology and cutting edge, we're at the forefront where we use similar to most in our business, but building information modeling, BIM modeling in the pre-construction. Scott talked about getting early trades involved in above ceiling for a reason. While they want to get them in that BIM model, we use the technology to pre-coordinate to be sure that long before we're out building, we've got these systems coordinated and ready to go. And another thing that comes to mind with our technology is our teams are supers in the field. Have got iPads. They've got technology where they've got the results of the BIM model right at their fingertips, and they can coordinate and communicate much more efficiently as well on our job sites.
Yeah, and I think something also that's unique with the BIM side of things for when you're doing studios, especially with the isolated ceilings, you have to get that carpenter to model. And once everything's modeled as far as MEPs go, you get that carpenter in there to model his isolators, his hangers. So that way that's all coordinated. So it goes nice and smoothly once it's time to install.
And just to add, on the schedule, we talked a lot about early engagement of the end users. Successfully, we have completed projects by not only engaging them in that design, and build process, but the schedule, to the point where we have them bring their installing contractors in and be part of development of the schedule, so that we make sure that we don't give them a month to pull cable that would really take 5 or 6 weeks. At least in a most recent project that we had completed, we found that to be very successful. And the installers had a lot of good points and a lot of things that we wouldn't necessarily have thought about that helped speed up the process and make spaces available a little bit earlier for them, which in the end makes that test, get ready to go live process easier for the client.
It's a good point. One of the more recent large headquarter projects we just finished on the broadcast media side, we did just that during the pre-construction. You would remember, Kiera, we brought in the subs to help with durations of the technology portion, but not only with us and how we were going to build, but also with the integrator involved, so that at the end of the day, everybody was given enough time to do the job the right way.
Jamie, this one's for you. With the rise of digital media, have you noticed any shifts in the needs and designs of broadcast and media facilities?
So yes, as we are doing right now, a podcast, and the streaming of said podcast, I think is one of the biggest shifts that we're seeing. And I've seen it in a project that we recently completed in the couple of years that they've been actually active and operating. So what do I mean by that, and how does it affect what we're talking about here? So the technology, the storage, and the ability to stream this type of content, historically, or if you want to call it even, from a legacy standpoint, was kind of bigger and bulkier. The storage was on site, as far as the data and the media. The broadcasting was, through that big CER process. But now, with the advancements in technology, that process is much more agile. And so what does that mean for construction? You can be doing a podcast or a streaming event in a smaller space. I'm not saying that the acoustic requirements change, but what it actually allows a person, say from a square footage standpoint, to do, or company, is build more streaming spaces, with that high-end acoustic requirement, in a smaller square footage, and not having to rely so much on that legacy backbone. And so in the end, they're able to get more use out of the space that they have. One of the other things that we're seeing as well, we've seen this in a couple of facilities, is those large studio spaces that we were talking about before, how they're built, for, like that. I don't want to call it a vanilla box, because it's not really, but it's scalable, it's flexible. So what we're seeing now is that, the end users have these studios that are sitting not idle, but maybe they have a little bit more space than they originally needed. So what they're doing is they're setting this up to become a rentable service, because essentially the backdrop of a studio and that robust media infrastructure is there, and you can do a lot with it. You can shoot movies in a 20 by 20 room now, with green screen technology or volume wall technology. But that being said, in that whole legacy design that you had maintained, you're residing on a network that is part of that corporate company. So in planning for that, what we've seen them start discussing and actually start doing is segregating their networks so that they can still use these studio spaces for their own content, but they can also, bring outside, users in and keep their data secure.
Yeah, that's great. I think as far as space required and everything, like you said, it is definitely, they're way more flexible than even in the past 8 years of what we started with.
Yeah, if you think about it, a podcast studio, for instance, that we've built, that we've built on many projects in the past, it's very large. There's, outside edit booths and all of, so say you had a 40 by 40 area square footage wise, that had the edit suites and everything looking into that central area. Well, now you can do a podcast in a much smaller environment, you still have to maintain the same acoustic requirements, but you could maybe fit 4 of those type of setups in that square footage. And, it all ends up, relating to, the value of your square footage and what you're able to generate as revenue from there.
Yeah. And it's also definitely seeing more the opportunity to share control rooms. Not every room needs every studio needs their own control room.
Sure.
So just same square footage wise. Mike, what is next for broadcast and media facilities?
Great question. Certainly there's a lot of good things happening right now that will continue to evolve and be out in front. Flexible spaces is very important now. It will continue to require the spaces to be very flexible, especially as the industry is shifting towards multi-platform content creation, where there's different production needs, whether it's a traditional broadcast, live streaming, or even a community event. That's another future focus of this industry, is really engaging the local content creators in the community. So they're going to be engaging more community activities within their locations to be sure that they're engaging the content creators that they often need, ultimately their customers in the marketplace. So integrating technology is going to continue as technology changes rapidly, as we know, especially with next generation TV. You heard Jamie talk about some of those elements on some of the projects that he's seen already. That's going to continue to grow. High-speed internet, cloud storage solutions. We talked about data analytics in this industry and how important it is to have that information as fast as possible, because it's making these spaces more efficient and really getting, like any business, enhancing their speed to market of their productions from these locations. This industry also has virtual reality and augmented reality elements that will be very much part of future broadcasting. Again, they need to be supported by particular specialty spaces, and then obviously the infrastructure to support that as well. And a lot of all the other sectors that we work at Structure Tone and in the business, sustainable design is very important, and sustainable practices we see in every industry, every sector. This sector, as it's emerging, we're beginning to see those elements be very put out in the forefront, and that will probably even grow, whether it's sustainable products on projects or being really cognizant of more efficient energy usage. You heard about the mechanical and electrical infrastructure. These spaces are drawing a lot of power, so focus on making sure that power is being utilized most efficiently will certainly be a focus on future spaces in this industry as well.
Well, this was great. It was fun talking studios. Thank you for listening to Building Conversations. Be sure to listen to this episode and any future episodes wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks.